Councillor Russell, you are live.
Great. Thank you very much, Annie. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Audit and Finance Standing Committee meeting of February 17th, 2022. I'm Paul Russell, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is currently 1:03 p.m. As a standard with meetings from here on out, I'd like to read a land acknowledgement and simply acknowledge that the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. And as is standard with these virtual meetings, I'd like to run around the table and just make sure that we have an audio-visual check of everybody who is here. So let's start with Councillor Daigle-Gammon from District 1. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair, colleagues, staff, and anyone who may be watching. A beautiful sunny afternoon. Awesome.
It is for now. That will change. And good afternoon, Councillor Hensby from District 2.
It's not sunny, it's cloudy and windy, and it's going to get worse.
It absolutely is. Thank you.
All right.
Councillor Purdy, District 4, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and everyone. Happy to be here. And it is very windy out. I just got back from a walk. There's a few gushes that nearly knocked me over. Windy.
You're home safe. That's what counts. Councillor Cleary, District 9, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here. Funny to note that all of those different weather reports reflect just the ginormous diversity and size of our municipality.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Councillor Morse, District 10, are you with us?
Yes, good afternoon.
Yes,
Mr.
there
Chair
you are.
And everyone. Yes. Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you. Mayor Savage, good afternoon.
Hey, Chair. How you doing, folks?
Doing great, thank you. Deputy Mayor, are you with us yet? There you are.
I am. Thank you. I'm glad to be joining today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Your background is reversed.
I see that now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Councillor Oathit, District 16, good afternoon.
I am. It's sunny, 20 degrees and no wind here. So I wish.
Wow.
Thank you for letting
exactly.
me crash the thank you for letting me crash the party, Mr. Chair.
Oh, not a problem.
A lot of wind inside there.
Yeah, thank you for joining us from Jamaica. And we have a number of staff as well who I have seen, and that is fantastic that we have enough people that we can move ahead. Just as a reminder to those councillors who are not part of the committee, you may not move, second, or amend motions, nor vote on any committee matters. We will be keeping an eye on this. And with that, let's move ahead. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of January 19th, 2022. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes, please?
So moved.
Councillor Daigle-Gammon, thank you. And Councillor Purdy seconds it. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Great, thank you. Approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Annie.
Thank you, Councillor. The clerk's office did not receive any requests for additions or deletions for today's meeting.
Okay, thank you. Can I have someone put a motion on the floor, please, to approve the order of business?
I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Morse. Second.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Daigle-Gammon. Any changes from members of committee? Thank you. Not seeing any. All in favor of the order of business, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Great. We have an order of business. Business arising out of the minutes is none. Call for declaration of conflicts of interest. Seeing none, let's move ahead. Motions of reconsideration, motions of rescission, consideration of deferred business, and notices of tabled matters are all none. Correspondence, Annie.
Thank you, Chair. There was one piece of correspondence received and circulated to the committee pertaining to an item that was on last month's meeting. This was distributed to the committee earlier this week.
Thank you very much. And do we have any petitions?
The clerk's office did not receive any notification of petitions.
Okay. And I don't see anything from members of the committee, so thank you. We don't have any presentations. We don't have any information items brought forward, so we are on to the report of the Auditor General. Good afternoon, Evangeline and Temi. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Correct. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Sorry, my video didn't turn on right away.
That's all right. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So let's start by sharing my presentation.
We can see that now.
Great. So good afternoon, folks. I'm pleased to be here this afternoon to talk about my recent audit of management of solid waste operations. Joining me for the meeting is the lead auditor for this assignment, Temi Woli, and Temi will take over some of the slides for me in a little bit. I'll go through the first few. So I'll do a little overview to start with. We found that overall, solid waste are effectively managing certain aspects of solid waste operations. Many key aspects of contracts are monitored. And we did find that there's a couple of areas where there's some room for improvement, and I'll detail that in the upcoming slides. Generally speaking, we found operations were consistent with legislative requirements, and we also found that waste diversion activities are effectively managed. We looked at some recent procurements in the solid waste area and found that vendor selection was fair and consistent with the procurement policy. So moving to some of the detailed results. We found solid waste reasonably manages many aspects of the various contracts in this in solid waste operations. We sampled 6 of those contracts, and we found that solid waste management tracked complaints, applied penalties when appropriate. We found they periodically observe collection activities and that they track tonnage going into the landfill and so on a daily as well as on a monthly basis. Solid waste relies on reports from contracted experts engaged by the facility operators to assess potential environmental impacts and to monitor things from an environmental perspective. Management told us that they regularly review these reports. However, we couldn't find support in 2 of the 4 instances that we looked at that review had been documented. And so from our perspective, of course, when it's not documented, we can't confirm that it was done. We did look at 3 of those environmental reports ourselves and note that there were no significant concerns identified by the consultant. Solid waste management does regular site visits to the various solid waste locations and have operational meetings with contractors for compost, for recycling, and for household special waste. However, the Otter Lake contract is treated differently. Management does meet with the operator, but it's generally to go over specific issues that may have been identified by Nova Scotia Environment or by the Otter Lake Community Monitoring Committee. Management told us they view this contract a bit differently than the others, since it specifically states that the operator is responsible to meet all the permit requirements. However, HRM is a joint permit holder for the Otter Lake facility, which leaves both parties with responsibility. Additionally, this contract is quite large, and we expected to see management monitoring all significant aspects of the contract. We've made a recommendation to that effect, and management has agreed to implement that recommendation. I'm going to turn things over to Temi now to go through the next few slides.
Good afternoon, everyone. The next couple of slides will cover the remaining monitoring sections, waste diversion, and vendor selection process. For the 6 solid waste contracts reviewed, we found that the contracts have reasonable terms and conditions to achieve value for money and protect the public interest. Few examples of sections covered in the contract include site management responsibilities, default and termination, and environmental responsibilities. We also tested a sample of 30 invoices for the 6 contracts we examined and found HRM made deductions for performance penalties where applicable. Next slide, please. We found HRM's waste management operations generally complied with provincial legislation and guidelines applicable to solid waste. We reviewed 4 facility operating permits where HRM is the sole permit holder in 3 and a joint permit holder with the contractor in 1 instance. We found that HRM submitted required reports to Nova Scotia Environment for the 3, and for the 4th permit, where HRM is a joint operator, the contracted operator prepared the reports for Nova Scotia Environment. Next slide, please. We found that solid waste has processes to comply with applicable requirements in the Nova Scotia Outer Lake Landfill Act and Nova Scotia Solid Waste Resource Management Regulations. Management is aware HRM's 2 composting facilities do not comply with the 2010 Nova Scotia Composting Facility Guidelines and would require significant improvement to achieve compliance. However, in 2020, HRM awarded a 25-year contract to design and operate a new composting facility, which is expected to meet the guidelines. We also reviewed applicable HRM administrative orders and bylaws. We found that management monitored the solid waste operations to ensure compliance with these applicable HRM policies. Also, we confirmed tonnage rates billed for recycling and organic facilities are consistent with rates in the applicable HRM policy. Next slide, please. Next is the waste diversion and education. HRM has a funding agreement with Diversion NS. Under the agreement, HRM receives funding, which is mostly based on reaching targeted hours of education through waste diversion training programs offered to the public. We reviewed the waste diversion education work plans for 2029-20 and 2020-21 and checked a sample of 4 programs to determine if the programs were implemented and monitored. We found solid waste implemented most of the programs except for 1, which was delayed due to COVID-19. Management developed an action plan for 2021-22 for this program. We also found that solid waste management monitors waste diversion programs. Next slide, please. Over to vendor selection process. We reviewed the vendor selection process for a sample of 3 solid waste requests for proposals. These were from 2019 to June 2021. We found the solid waste vendor selection process was fair and consistent with HRM procurement policy. The submissions were consistent with proposal requirements. Evaluators' comments supported the scores awarded to each proponent, and all evaluators completed conflict of interest forms. Thank you. Back to you, Evan.
Thanks very much, Tammy. I'll wrap things up. So this audit had 2 recommendations. One is related to reviewing and documenting the results of that review for consultant reports on environmental matters, and additional monitoring of the Otter Lake contract. Management has agreed to implement both of those recommendations, and as is our typical practice, we will follow up in 18 months. Finally, I'd like to thank staff and management at Solid Waste Operations for their cooperation during these audits. It certainly makes it easier to get the work done when staff are helpful and readily available. So appreciate that. And thanks also, of course, to the team in my office who do the heavy lifting on these audits, and they're the ones behind the results that I speak to you about today. So thank you very much. And Tammy or I would be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much for that report. We do have some questions. As a reminder to the councillors and the mayor, if you would like to ask questions, please signify that in the chat. Go ahead, Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Evangeline, for the report. I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit more about, I think what I understood is that the operator is doing the reports for the provincial government, so there's no independence there. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what the risks might be there that you see, and what are the risks happening with the non-compliance with the 2010 guidelines? Thank you.
Thank you. So generally speaking, in some instances, solid waste might be working with consultants or the operator might be working with them. But generally speaking, the environmental reports are done by external consultants. So even though HRM may not have been the ones that contracted those consultants directly, it's my understanding that the operators would be contracting with consultants. And in relation to the composting facilities not meeting the guidelines, we did not look into that a tremendous amount during our audit, largely because in, I believe it was 2020, approval was given for a new facility. And one of the requirements in relation to the RFP for that is that that facility meets the new guidelines. So we didn't see sort of the ongoing part of that to be a big risk.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Morse. Go ahead, Councillor Hensby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My question in regards to following up from Councillor Morris's comments about the compliance orders. Just kind of curious, if we weren't in compliance, what was the nature of the non-compliance, and was it Department of Environment matter that we had to satisfy to keep the operational permits going? I'd like to know how it was rectified, because I don't recall hearing anything being brought to council's attention on those matters. As well as I have thought that these facilities were built to the state of the art and to the standards required by the province at the time they were built. And unless the compliance regulations have changed significantly, I'd just like to know how these, what was in violation, what was the nature of them, and how were they rectified?
So are you speaking to the compost facilities and our comment that those are not in compliance? So my understanding of that, as I said, we didn't look at this, we didn't look into this a great deal in our audit because there has been a recent award for a new facility. My understanding is that the facilities may have been compliant when they were built, but they were built quite some time ago. I would imagine that solid waste staff could provide you with a little more info on exactly in what way they're not currently in compliance. Solid waste staff were well aware of that. It certainly wasn't anything we brought to their attention. And there was a report to council and ultimately an RFP process and so on out of that. I believe the report to council was in 2020. But I suspect Andrew, if he's on the line, or perhaps Brad, could speak to a little more detail on that if you wanted it.
We do have Andrew and Brad in the meeting, so Andrew has popped up. Go ahead.
Thank you through the chair to the councillor. Councillor Hensby, the existing composting facilities were built to the guidelines of the day. Key to that is the 1996 Composting Council standards with respect to compost quality. Back in 2014, when we did a solid waste strategy review, we identified the challenges with meeting the modern guidelines, which were released by Nova Scotia Environment in 2010. It is one of the reasons why we undertook developing a new facility. So this has been documented as far back as 2014. Thank you.
So in the meantime, the facilities are operating until the new facilities, replacement facility is done. So are they operating according to the old guidelines, or are they in compliance with the new guidelines?
So again, through the chair to the councillor, so the existing facilities are completely compliant with their existing approvals. Those existing approvals utilize the 1996 compost standards, and so the new facility, when it will be built, will meet the modern 2010 guidelines. So that's the dynamic there with respect to those guidelines. We meet our approval. We are fully compliant with them today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Evangeline for, and I can't pronounce the second name, sorry. Tammy. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. So my question is about the second recommendation, additional monitoring of the Otter Lake facility contract. In the scope of the audit, did that include a conversation? Because it just, when I was reading in the report, I wasn't sure if it was just solely on the solid waste part. And then I was wondering, where did the Otter Lake community, were they engaged in any part of the audit? Because this looks like when you look at the contract that they have and the agreement that they have, and I'm just wondering how fulfilling this second recommendation, how that happens, and was the community group in any way involved or asked questions in terms of that additional monitoring?
Thank you. So we did speak with members of the Community Monitoring Committee during the planning stages of our audit. We didn't talk to them specifically about this recommendation because this recommendation is entirely directed at HRM management in terms of their contract management. So currently, any issues that are brought forward by the Community Monitoring Committee falls within the realm of the things that HRM solid waste operations would meet with the operator about. There was just additional areas where we thought they probably should be doing more monitoring of the contract. And that's what that particular recommendation is directed towards. So we didn't speak with the Community Monitoring Committee about that, but we did talk to them during the planning stages. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Just as a quick follow-up then, in terms of over the next 18 months, fulfilling, looking at the additional monitoring of the contract, in any way, would that precipitate a change to the contract?
No, it's a long-term contract. Okay. That wasn't anything that we were recommending, and staff do feel that they can implement this recommendation within the parameters of that contract, is my understanding. They have agreed with the rec and indicated that they plan to implement.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the answers.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. We don't have any further speakers on this. We also don't have a motion related to this report. So council, we can move ahead, or we can generate a motion to, for example, forward this to council as an information item. Oh, and Councillor Daigle-Gammon has popped up again. Go ahead.
A question of process again, I guess. Just it's a follow-up in 18 months. Do we get an update like halfway through that 18-month cycle, or do we just wait for the 18 months?
So if you wanted me to speak to that, Councillor, Mr. Chair, through you to the Councillor, it's always our suggestion that audit and finance require management to prepare an action plan, indicate when they will implement the recs, sort of what the different steps they're taking are and what the timing of those steps are. Those are good things to monitor over that 18-month period. Whether it be every 6 months, whether it be at the 1 year mark, and that's all entirely up to the committee, but it certainly would be considered a good practice or a best practice to do that.
Great. I guess and then the other question I might have would be whether or not there is or should be a requirement to go in camera for any conversation.
We did not have anything that we need to discuss in camera as a result of this particular audit. Thank you for
Great. Thanks. So, Mr. Chair, if a motion to have a recommendation and an action plan, a follow-up within the year.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Daigle-Gammon. So you're looking to make a motion to require solid waste to develop an action plan for this audit and report back to council with that. Would you also like to forward this as an information item to council?
I think maybe I'd want to check with our legal counsel. I would think that it would still be a motion to get the action plan.
It would be, yes.
Yes. Yes.
There would be two parts of a motion or two separate motions.
Thank you.
Annie, are you able? Go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, no, if legal can just help craft that motion into the chat, that would be awesome. There is an action plan and an information report brought forward to Regional Council.
Thank you. Annie, do you have that? Or John?
Thank you, Councillor, working on that now.
Thank you.
Well, just while Annie's working on that, I guess I need to clarify, is that a recommendation that council move a motion for an action plan in response? That's probably where it should go, or it would be coming back here. I think it's really one, frankly, operationally, it should be recommendation that council.
A recommendation of council rather than here at Audit and Finance? Okay.
The Audit and Finance move a motion recommending that you're planning to forward this to Regional Council for information, together with a recommendation that Regional Council move for a staff report and action plan in terms of responding.
That would be awesome, Mr. Traves.
Just fleshing it out. Annie, did you get that?
Yes, breaking it up into two separate points right now.
We need the Jeopardy theme song.
Yes. Far be it from me to add more angst to the legal team, but you know.
Well, I think just in the past practice where staff agrees and has set out in the Auditor General's report the response in terms of what they're going, that traditionally has been seen as the action plan and the commitment, and then the follow-up by the Auditor General. And so it hasn't been seen as necessarily, I think, for past members of council that they move a motion for another response in addition to that. So that is the action plan currently, just to lay that out, and the Auditor General will then report back in 6 months as to how we're making out on that. So I guess I'm just raising with you, Councillor, whether your motion is really necessary in the circumstances, the way that the past practice has been.
The challenge lately has been what is written and what is not. So if it's not in print, does that mean it's
and fair enough, and it will give council an opportunity to debate staff's response to the Auditor General's report. So I take your point. I'll leave it to Sherry, and I think the Auditor General, I saw a note that she was looking to add to the conversation.
Absolutely, yes. Go ahead, Evangeline.
Thank you. So a couple of points. There have been a few instances in the past where a specific action plan has been requested. The procurement audit comes to mind as one. There's been at least one or two others, but it hasn't been something every single report. That is for sure. It definitely is a better practice that a more detailed action plan than what you would see in a fairly limited word response in here be provided. That would be, for example, if you oversight committee training and so on would suggest that you obtain that from management. And I just wanted to clarify, and John, I suspect you maybe misspoke on this one, but you referred to me following up in 6 months. And I think you meant management following up with either Audit and Finance or Regional Council in 6 months, because we don't follow up until the 18-month mark.
Right.
So I just wanted to clarify that, because I figured he meant to say management and said myself by accident.
Yep. Thank you for that clarification, Evangeline. Councillor Daigle-Gammon, we do have the motion in the chat if you're interested in reading one or both halves of that.
Certainly, I don't think that it does harm. So I would move that the Audit and Finance Standing Committee 1 forward the management of the solid waste operations audit report to Regional Council as an information item, and 2 recommend that the Halifax Regional Council direct the CAO to prepare a staff report regarding an action plan to address the recommendations outlined in the management of the solid waste operations audit report within a year.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Morse, I saw first. Okay, thank you. Is there anything on that motion?
I think we've covered it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing anything from members of the committee. All in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Great, thank you. That motion passes. Thank you very much, Evangeline. The next item on the agenda is 12.2.1, the third quarter, and thank you also, Temi, I'm sorry. The third quarter 2021-22 financial report. At this point, we should have Dave Hurley with us. There you go. Go ahead, Dave, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Dave Harley, Director of Accounting and Financial Reporting, and I'm just going to start sharing my screen here.
And that looks great, thank you.
Okay, so I'm here this afternoon to bring forward the third quarter financial update. Beginning with our general rate surplus, we're currently projecting a surplus of $9.6 million for the fiscal year. Included in this is an increase of our transfer taxes of $17 million. As previously mentioned, we have the delay in the receipt of the fall debenture, which has pushed back our interest and principal payments, which has resulted in a $9.6 million surplus in this fiscal year. Permit revenues continue to increase due to a large volume of permits and some higher value permits as well. So those are up $4 million. And we've also seen savings in our compensation and benefits of $3.7 million. Finally, we have an increase in our tax revenues due to a decrease in appeals this year, which is up $2.4 million now. Offsetting all these increases, we've seen an increase in our RCMP costs due to the expected retroactive payments of their new contracts. So that's another $6.7 million. Field expenses continue to increase, so we're up to $4.9 million deficit there. We have the emergency housing funds the council has approved, which is another $4.9 million in this fiscal year. Due to the impacts of COVID-19, we're seeing some deficits arising in the MBFs and the Scotiabank Centre, which we're going to be funding, which is totaling around $4.4 million. We've also seen a decrease in our transit fares, again, as a result of COVID. So that's another $3.3 million deficit we're looking at. And we just did have some increased OCC expenses this year, which we're currently projecting about $2.9 million. Looking at our risks that we have outstanding at this point in time this year, so we're acknowledging there are still additional impacts of COVID-19 that could have impacts on our financial numbers. The impacts on the transit ridership levels as a result of COVID are continuing to cause us issues. In the middle of our winter, so we know that there may still be some additional winter events which may have negative impacts on our numbers. We're also continuing to see those increases in costs for fuel and diesel costs, as well as inflationary costs across the board in terms of our sourcing of supplies. And finally, we just have the housing monies that we're identifying as a risk as well at this point in time. Moving on to our councillor funds. In terms of district capital, we have a $3 million budget for the fiscal year. At this point in time, at the end of Q3, we've had $1.9 million has been committed or spent, and we have another $1 million available for councillors to spend. In terms of district activity funds, we have a $72,000 budget in total. $39,800 has been spent at the end of Q3, which leaves another $32,200 available to spend this year. Moving on to our recreation area rates, there are 21 area rates that we have across the municipality. Surpluses in these area rates are totaled $1.3 million at the start of the year. We've seen revenues of $888,000 come in and have had expenses of $779,000 so far. So our current surplus as of December 31st is $1.4 million across these area rates. Moving on to the reserves, you can see we have a projected available balance is currently $303.6 million. Sorry. And looking at the next several years, we have in 22-23, we're projecting to be about $297 million, $307 million in 23-24, and $337 million by 24-25. Looking at our accounts receivable, we currently have a total gross accounts receivable of nearly $45 million. Of this, $19.1 million is related to our outstanding property taxes. We have $12.6 million in local improvement charges. Payments in lieu of taxes are $9.2 million, and a further $3.9 million in general revenue outstanding. For our capital projections, as of December 31st, we had a net budget available of $382 million, and we had spent $147.1 million of that. We're projecting a further $73.4 million of expenditures by March 31st, so we're looking to carry forward into the next year $161.4 million of our capital budget. Finally, moving on to the last few mandatory reporting pieces we have. So for hospitality expenses, we're still seeing a severe decrease in this as a result of COVID. We did have $838 this year, or sorry, this quarter, resulting from one event that we had for diversity and inclusion. And then finally, on to our expenses for reportable individuals. The total for this quarter was $12,000, made up of local travel, out-of-town travel, training, and a few other miscellaneous things. Our year-to-date total for all of these is now $18,000, and you can see it broken out by counselor there. So that's the end of the presentation, and now we're ready for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Dave. Once again, to councillors, if anybody would like to ask a question, please signify that by putting something in the chat. It would also be helpful if someone would indicate if they are looking to make a motion to forward this to council as an information item. Go ahead, Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Sure. I would move that the Audit and Finance Standing Committee forward the third quarter 2021-22 financial report to Regional Council for their information.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy. Is there anything on that? Not seeing any. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question. Thank you for the report, Dave. The increase in deed transfer of 17 million, where does that put us projected for the end of this year?
Let me just pull that up. Yes. So I'm just trying to find the total of what that brings us to.
67, I think, isn't it, Dave?
I believe it's in that area, yes.
And the budget was, I didn't print off the financial report. Was the budget 60 for this year? I can't remember.
I believe it was 50.
50. But next year, we're in next year's plan, it's 80 million, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. The other thing I'd note is if you just look at the increased fuel expense of almost 5 million and the decrease in transit fare of 3 million, you're looking at $8 to $9 million in costs for us keeping transit going during the pandemic, further to the discussion that we had yesterday. And the government has just announced that they're going to, federal government has just announced that they're going to come out with an operating shortfall plan in concert with provinces. And so this is another reason why we need to have that support. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Just a sec there. I think, Dave, I said 67 million. I think it's 77 million, is it not, for detransfer? It was a budget of 60 million with an increase of 17 for 77 million. I think
I believe you're right.
Yeah,
it was a $6 million budget, $77 million projection.
Yep.
And the projection is 80 million for the upcoming.
Yes,
that's right. And we're tracking those trends carefully, just trying to see how close we're going to be and what kind of room we have in the 82-83 budget on detransfer tax.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Not seeing any further questions. Are we ready for the question? Go ahead, Councillor Morse.
Sorry, a little late with this. So how does this change, if it does, the items on the budget over list? Does this give us more room to move on that or not?
This is a reporting of what has happened.
Okay. So
Yeah, I can speak to that. So I just want to just chime in on the mayor's question there. The budget for detransfer tax this year was 60 million, not 50 million. With respect to the BOW, obviously, you know, council will have you know, some levers with respect to how that is funded. That'll come up in the debate. That'll be coming up the end of March. You know, in the past, we have looked to the corporate surplus to fund certain things, more on the lines of items that are one time in nature. But I will, you know, maybe Dave, if you could jump on, or Bruce, just to explain, we do have a placeholder in the corporate surplus that has already been allocated to this year's fiscal framework. So I think that's an important context for audit and finance to be aware of.
That's correct, Jerry. So currently the 22-23 budget assumes that we will use $7 million of this year's surplus to help keep the tax rate down and to help fund services. So there's not going to be a huge amount of money, at least based on what we know now, on top of that 7 million. And the only other point I'll add is that 7 million, it certainly helps you in this year, but it means that when you head into the 23-24 budget, which is still a ways away, we're going to have to replace that $7 million with something else. We're only going to get to use that once.
Should also point out, as of Q2, when we did that $7 million allocation, we were projecting about $11 million in surplus, and now we're down to 9.6 with some of the impacts of COVID. So that gap is shrinking.
okay, thank you for that context. Thank you.
Yeah, and one thing, you know, we'll point out, and it's in the slides there, that, you know, we do have an allocation for the RCMP contract that we have put away. That is still an unknown at this time, and I think you know, many municipalities are certainly trying to get the intel from the federal government on the retroactivity, and is that going to be downloaded? We feel you know, was necessary for us to be prepared for that, but that is still you know, a bit of an unknown at this point, but we feel we're adequately covered off if that cost is downloaded. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to give you a little bit more background. So when we set up the 22-23 budget, we look closely at what our actuals are. So when you look at that big slide that Dave gives you with the increases in costs of gas and the higher detransfer tax, most of those things are things that we've built into the 22-23 budget. So we have the higher gas in there. We've looked at the transit fares. So we're using all the information from 21-22 to help us project forward in the 22-23.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morse. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
First of all, Bruce, come on, man. Don't be talking about next year's budget. We're trying to get through this one. You're scaring us, brother.
Hey, I didn't talk about 24-25.
Oh my gosh, almighty, man. Just a quick one. We often talk about reserves, and the projected balance in the reserves at the end of March is 303.6, and you've outlined the next three. What was it at the end of March 31, 2021?
At the end of 2021, you can hear me? Yeah, I do have that on. At the end of 2021, I believe it was 336 million. That's the number I have up.
And some of that is being used in this upcoming budget as well, right?
Yes. Now, we do intend, and so I extend this as an invite, we do intend when we go back with the fiscal business unit presentation to give you a little bit more details in the reserves and how they work. So if there's some background that you would like to see or that's causing any confusion or difficult to interpret, let us know so we can try to highlight that and kind of go through it.
Well, as you know, I'm always interested in the history and the projection of reserves, as well as the history and the projection of debt when we start coming to doing the ins and the outs and the ups and the downs. So thank you for that.
Yeah, so if that's the case, if you want us to go back 5 years and kind of show you what we said it would be and where it would be and what's changed and things like that, we could do something like that if you thought it was useful. If there's something else you'd like, just let us know.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. I don't see any further comments in the chat. Are we ready for the question on this? Councillor Hensby, go ahead.
Just a quick question. How quickly should we expect the fourth quarter year-end figures, and will our current debate on budget be over by then, or we'll have an opportunity to anticipate any use of the surplus we anticipate coming forward?
We don't anticipate having the Q4 results prior to well after the close of the budget debate. Generally, just as part of our regular year-end accounting close, it'll take us quite a bit longer than that to finalize our year. So what will happen is we will come back when we do our year-end with recommendations for how we're going to utilize that surplus at that time.
So with the upcoming budget debate we're still in now for 22-23, can we make some anticipated forecast for surplus and utilize that in our budget? Are we allowed to do that, or we got to wait for the hard figures to determine what is the actual figures and how it would be allocated to certain reserve accounts, where the case may be? Because right now we're debating taking money out of reserve and moving things around. If we know there's going to be an anticipated surplus, perhaps we can be a little more flexible. So.
Yeah, Councillor Jerry here. Yeah, what we can say on that is, and Bruce just mentioned is, of the 9.6 that we're projecting right now, we already allotted 7 million of that has already been earmarked for this year's budget. So that leaves 2.6. That's not a big surplus. Certainly, as we go into the final stages of the budget debate, we will have some level of assurance if there's an opportunity to leverage any one-time items on the BAL for from the corporate surplus. But we want to flag right now that that's a pretty thin margin, 2.6 million at this point. It could go up a little bit. It could go down. Like I said, if we got confirmation from the federal government about the RCMP contracts and the retroactivity, certainly that is something that is back on the table, and we would be full disclosure with council on that. But as Dave said, we wouldn't be back with the final report to council on general rate surplus until after our external audit. So we're looking at late July, early August, I believe, is the time frame there.
Yeah, and just to build on that, Jerry, we've got the 7 million going in there to support operating. I'm not sure that you want to go much higher than 7 supporting that operating, because you have to replace it in 23, 24.
That's right.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I mentioned that year again, but it is a reality in our world. And so we'd really say use that for one-time things if you had extra over the 7. I think that's probably where we'd go, Jerry.
Yeah, exactly. And that was my point on that is, surplus and reserves to fund BAL items are typically used for one-time items. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any further comments in the chat. So all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Great, thank you. That motion passes. Thank you, Jerry and Bruce and Dave. The next item on the agenda is item 12.2.2, the alternate procurement award for the Broad Street North Roundabout. There is no presentation for this report, but we do have staff available to answer questions. We also have a motion on the floor. So if somebody could put that motion on the floor first, and then we can dig into it a little bit.
I'll put it on the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy.
All right, I move that the Audit and Finance Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council, 1, approve an unbudgeted reserve withdrawal of $1,350,000 from the Capital Fund Reserve Q526. 2, approve a budget increase of $3,250,000 to capital account CTU01006 Bedford West oversizing, with $1,350,000 coming from Reserve Q526 and $1.9 million coming from capital cost contributions, CCCs. 3, award alternative procurement 22-1024 for the design and construction of a roundabout at the intersection of Larry Utech Boulevard and Broad Street North through an alternative procurement to West Bedford Holdings Limited at a maximum value of $3,250,000 net HST included, as outlined in the financial implications section of this report.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy, and thank you, Councillor Morse, for seconding that. Are there any questions on that? I do see Councillor Audit. Yep, go ahead.
Your brain is faster than my typing. That's probably a very good thing. Mr. Chair, thank you, first of all, for allowing me to speak. And second, I really want to pass along some thanks to Jerry and to Peter Duncan and to Clayton Developments, who have really come together to deal with the situation that we have here. And it's largely a positive situation. It's just coming a year sooner than we thought it was going to. As we know, they're building two schools that are connected to each other up off Larry Utech in West Bedford and bordering on Councillor Deputy Mayor Lovelace's district as well. And last year we built a roundabout in the area that was outsourced, sole sourced to Clayton Developments. It was done on time, on budget, and it's working well. We thought we had another year before the second one would be required because of it was so crucial that we have it done before the school's open. Obviously, we don't want this construction going on once students are in the area, and we need this infrastructure in place for buses, cars, foot traffic, bicycles, etc., to get to the two new schools, which could easily be 1,500 students, ranging from pre-primary right up to grade 12. We thought we had another year. The school is moving ahead to open the elementary school portion sooner because of the crowding in different areas of both councillors' Lovelace's district and mine, and then we'll build the school a year later. So we don't have as long as we thought we did. That's why we need to dip into the reserve. We thought we were going to pay for it out of capital a year from now. And of course, the majority or a good portion of this is coming out of the capital cost contributions as well, which all of you know I'm a big fan of. So this it's necessary to move it forward a year. Staff has found a funding source that they are comfortable with, and both Deputy Mayor Lovelace and I were just here to add our support to meeting this for safety as well as access to the new school. And I think Mike Connor is here if there's any questions. Peter Duncan is tied up with another meeting, but if there's any questions, I think Mike Connor is here. But there's precedent for this being done, and we just need your help to have this ready for the opening. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Audit, and go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Audit. This is an incredibly busy area, growing extremely quickly, and quicker than we anticipated, considering all of the development that's happening right now with West Bedford. the housing crisis that we're in. Bedford West Holding, Clayton Development, they're doing the best they can is to move the housing forward. At the same time, the province identified Broad Street as a great location for these two schools. And knowing how desperate the situation is with overcapacity in West Bedford and the Hamas Plains area, it is important to open those schools, and we all recognize that. And so I think this is just one of those shifts and pivots that HRM needs to do in order to meet the needs and ensure that public safety is paramount, because putting school buses on Larry UTEC and turning into that intersection as it is right now is quite problematic. So I encourage you to support this effort. And I would also like to thank staff who worked double time once we found out that HRCE was moving forward with opening that elementary school. So thanks, staff. You did a great job and you worked very quickly. Really appreciate your work on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Go ahead, Councillor Morse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a technical question, really. How long does it typically take to build a roundabout? I'm familiar with the Windsor Street, and that's, I know that one's quite a bit bigger, but still, I think it takes time to engineer and do the drawings and actually construct them.
It's about 3 months. I can jump in, Chair, if it's helpful. It was about 3 months to build the last one. But one reason why we're sending this off to Clayton is they have the design largely ready, and they can pivot a little faster than the city can, and they can use a lot of what was done for the previous. So they'll need an answer in March to design it, to have it built in 3 months over this construction season. That's my understanding, unless Mike has anything to contradict.
Mike has given us a thumbs up. Would you like to add anything to that?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Mike Connors, Program Manager with Transportation Planning. I was giving a thumbs up just to say that that's a good answer by Councillor Outhit. Typically a longer time to design and construct a roundabout, certainly, but the efficiencies that come with doing this through West Bedford Holdings certainly allows us to deliver that quicker than is typical.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morse. Councillor Dago-Gammon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Awesome that the staff were able to find a solution and pivot as quickly as they did. I just wonder a small amount, and it's just a question of clarification only, and that is that it goes to Clayton Development. Is that considered a sole, like in terms of procurement, is that sole sourced? Is there any concern or issue around that?
Jerry has popped up. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Good question. And this is certainly meets our procurement policy. There is a defined process for sole source that it has to go through pretty much like a decision matrix. And this one certainly fits the bill in terms of work we've done there in West Bedford, the timeliness to get the roundabout designed and to get it operational for the potential school opening. So yeah, it checks all the boxes on a sole source procurement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have? I don't see any further requests to speak in the chat. Do we have any guarantees or any concerns about it opening on time for the school year, or are we just projecting that it will and going with it?
Mr. Chair, the plan is to build it over the summer, and the earliest the school would open would be September. But the idea is to have it designed in the spring, built in the summer, during the quieter traffic period. And if the school is on time, we're hoping it'll open in September. But I don't think that's carved in stone yet. But they're trying to open it a year ahead. But the idea is to have this done early in the construction season, so it doesn't conflict with the opening of the school.
Okay, and are there any risks if it misses and goes late? I don't know who would be able to answer that.
Probably above my pay grade, I guess.
Mr. Chair, we will do, the hope is that we would have it done in time. the quicker we get it done, the less risk there is with the school opening. But that's kind of why we're proceeding as quickly as we can, just to get it done as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. And go ahead, Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Just one more quick cross. With this coming up a year in advance, and I know it's going to Clayton, but it doesn't bump any of their project. There isn't an opportunity cost here that we have to be concerned about, is there?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Can you hear me now? Okay. Yeah, no, there's no real opportunity cost here. This was a year out in our capital budget, so we're just going to fund from the capital reserve, and then when we bring back the capital budget, next year, the capacity that was in the year 2 funding will just be taken out, and it will net out. So again, we're going to the capital reserve, and that's what reserves are really for, is for opportunities like this, and provide that flexibility to sort of be nimble and to be able to take advantage of an opportunity like this.
Good, just double check it. Thanks.
Good question.
Thank you very much, Councillor Daigle-Gammon. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. That's a great question, Councillor. I also wanted to point out that Halifax Water has already done their significant infrastructure work connecting Broad Street on both sides to Brookline. And so that work actually took place last summer. So Larry UTEC has seen an incredible amount of infrastructure work from both at the south end and the north end of Brookline. So just wanted to let you know, this project, once the designs are finalized, it's ready to build, and certainly the IMP work and the pedestrian pathways and all of that will be integrated, considering this is a school zone. So much care will be taken to ensure that we have a quality design here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Go ahead, Councillor Morse.
Just because I'm not familiar with projects on such a tight timeline, do we ever consider under these conditions having some sort of penalty for missed days, for missed deadlines?
Mike, Jerry.
That would be up to Clayton in this case, because we're outsourcing it to Clayton.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor, I'm not sure exactly of the specific penalties associated with this contract. Adam, I don't know if you wanted to add anything. That's something we could follow up on after, but there's Adam.
Good afternoon, through the chair to the councillor. It's something that's a topic we can discuss with our colleagues in procurement and legal. We did discuss that last year with the accelerated build. For the southern roundabout, so we can discuss that topic again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Morse. Councillor Outhet.
Just very quickly, I wanted to mention that I'm encouraging both HRM staff and Clayton Development staff to build this over the summer. The last one was done on budget, as I mentioned, and on schedule in 3 months, but it was done during the back to school and basically September to December. So we're really hoping that this will be built over the summer when traffic is down, because as Councillor Deputy Mayor Lovelace says, it's a very busy and growing area now, and it would be nice if it could be done over the summer when the traffic is down, obviously. So and of course to be ready for school to open in September. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Outhet. I see no further questions in the chat. So all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Great, thank you. That motion passes. The next item on the, thank you, Councillor Outhet and Deputy Mayor, for joining us. The next item on the order of business is 12.2.3, the 21-22 write-off of uncollectible accounts. There is no presentation for this, but we do have staff available to answer questions. So could someone please put the motion on the floor?
can do that for you, Mr. Chair, if you'd like.
Thank you.
Move that the Audit and Finance Standing Committee, 1, forward this report to HRM Regional Council for approval. 2, forward the private and confidential in-camera report, write-off of uncollectible account details to HRM Regional Council as an in-camera information report, and that the report not be released to the public. 3, recommend that Halifax Regional Council approve 1, the real property tax accounts in the amount of $74,879.10, comprised of $43,334.19 principal and $31,544.91 interest, as summarized in Schedule 1 to be formally written out of the books of account. B, the general revenue accounts in the amount of $9,593.37, comprised of $9,552.68 principal and $40.69 interest, as summarized in Schedule 1, be formally written out of the books of accounts. C, the recreation accounts in the amount of $26,124.15, comprised of $26,124.15 principal and 0 interest, as summarized in Schedule 1, be formally written out of the books of accounts.
Thank you, Councillor Daigle-Gammon. Do we have someone to second that, please? Would anyone be willing to second?
Councillor Cleary will second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cleary. I don't see any. Go ahead, Councillor Morse.
Thank you. I just have a question about the first item, the $35,000, $35,500 write-off for United Golf.
I'm sorry, just a reminder, Councillor Morse, we are in public session here.
Sorry.
Would you go ahead?
So if I have questions about an item,
in camera,
this one or other items, how do I ask about that?
Yeah, we can go in camera for that.
Okay, my apologies.
Would you like us to go in camera?
I would, please.
So you would make the motion that we go in camera?
Yes, I would like to move that we go in camera to discuss an item on the list.
Second, Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. I see John has popped up.
Going in camera, we might wish to address the other in-camera item at the same time.
We are having, oh, yes, we might be able to deal with the other item at the same time.
If I mean, there's limited ability, given the confidentiality of the Auditor General's work, to provide any further detail than what's in the report, but certainly if there's something that can be shared, we can do that.
So are you suggesting, John, that we put the second motion on the floor as well? I'm not.
No, we can. Yeah, I'm just suggesting that for the agenda and for the record, that this item could be addressed in camera, and and we can deal with the motion in camera, and then the public facing motion when we come out of camera.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. So all in favor of going in camera, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. You should have a second link in your calendar, so that would be a Teams link. Let's leave this meeting for now and go in camera. We'll see you on the other side.
Just as a reminder to all councillors to please leave this meeting when joining the Teams meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we are back from our in-camera session. Just want to wait for a couple of minutes to make sure that enough people are here that we can proceed.
Mr. Chair, my screen says the meeting is still in camera is what I have up. Is that yours too?
Yes, and
Okay.
Annie will be taking the slide down just as soon as we can. Actually, I guess it's Jill who is hosting this.
Councillor Russell, we do now have a quorum. We are still missing one councillor from in camera, but we can take down the screen on your call.
I'm comfortable moving ahead. Yes. And again, thank you very much, everybody, for waiting, for those who are still watching. We are back and we have some motions to ratify. And where are we?
We call for the question on item 12.2.3.
Yep, I was just finding that. Thank you very much, Councillor Daigle-Gammon. So this is the write-off of uncollectible accounts. Is there any further discussion on that in public? No. Okay. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion, or sorry, all opposed. That motion passes. Thank you. Next items are the grants committee. There is nothing from their committee members, nothing from their motions. There's nothing from there. We had.
Should we not ratify the in-camera motion?
We are getting down there, Councillor
Okay, all
Hensby.
right.
That is the next item on the list. So 14.1 is the contract negotiations. Could somebody, we have that motion in the chat. Would somebody be interested in moving that motion?
Mr. Chairman, the private confidential item, the one, what's it? Where is it in the chat? Trying to find it here.
Chat.
Oh, there it is. Slide it up a bit. The Audit and Finance Standing Committee, one, adopt the recommendations outlined in the private confidential staff report dated February 15th, 2022, and two, to direct that the staff report dated February 15th, 2022 be maintained as private and confidential. So duly moved.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that?
Second.
I saw Councillor Purdy. Thank you very much. There is no discussion on that, so all in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, say nay. Great, that motion passes. Thank you very much. We have dealt with the information items. There are no added items. Are there any notices of motion? I don't see any. So the date of the next meeting is March 9th, 2022. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I so move.
Thank you very much. Thank you very